Hi, Jana. I'm so
Oh,
excited to be on with you today and have this chat with you. The astrology of the times has been lit. Well, for me, anyways.
yeah.
This last full moon had me not sleeping, which is kind of normal for me, but also full of passion and intensity, feelings of restlessness, and also some digestive stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All the things.
All of that makes sense. Check, check, check.
So I'm also wondering, Jana, where are you joining us from today?
Oh, I'm currently in Nelson, British Columbia. It's a little kind of
Amazing.
out of the way mountain ski town.
Oh, I know the place well. We used to journey to the Slocan Valley
Mm,
once a year. So it's kind of in that area to visit some friends that are living off grid.
yeah.
Beautiful area.
Yeah, it's really a special spot.
Yeah, and I'm in Alberta, so not that far away.
Yeah, I lived there for years. Calgary, Edmonton, I did it.
Ah,
Well,
there you go.
yeah.
So I'm wondering, how did you find yourself in astrology, and how has that helped you along your healing journey?
Yeah, I've answered this question so many times, going to try and answer it a little bit differently.
Hmm.
Because if people are listening, they're like, "What? I've heard this a million times."
Yeah.
And all of the perspectives are true. But I would say that astrology found me more than I found it. Like I'm a bit of an accidental astrologer. It was never something I set out to do. But I've always had, from the time I was a little girl, a natural attraction to the sky. And it's always been
Mm.
where I go. And I was really fortunate to have grown up in Saskatchewan outside of a small town with very minimal light pollution. So the sky was available to me my whole life. And as much as I have lived in big cities like Venice Beach and, Calgary and Edmonton, I've still always made a point of having access to the stars. There are few things I love more than laying out on the earth with a wide open sky of stars. I mean, that came to like learning about constellations and then watching the moon phases and just seeing in myself how it affected me. Um, and I remember a girlfriend of mine had her boyfriend move in with us at one point, and he was an astrologer. And
Mm.
he read her chart, and I was floored. I was like, what is going on here? Before that, I had a girlfriend who was obsessed with that big book of birthdays. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
I
And
think so. Yep.
she would like study all of her friends' birthdays, and it was like her party trick. Like, what's your birthday? Oh, you're the day of blah 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 blah. And that also was an influence. But really, I started to go more into astrology as I was teaching yoga and theming classes. I was an Anusara yoga teacher for a long time. And we always had to theme our classes. And if you're teaching like 16 classes a week, coming
Mm.
up with themes all the time became challenging. And so I'd theme on the new moon or the full moon or the equinox or the solstice or significant astrological events like eclipses or, you know, as I would hear things and read blogs about it, I would start to bring that into class as inspiration. And
Mm.
then I just started studying. It just got interesting, once that door was open.
Yeah, it's so expansive and so accurate in so
It's,
many ways.
yeah. Yeah. And what I found really fascinating was like I just said, I was part of the Anusara yoga community.
Mm.
And if anybody knows the history there, John Friend kind of tumbled down a hill and like off a pedestal. And
Mm.
at that same time, I didn't have any real local teachers. I didn't have like a teacher, and I shifted my studentship to the stars, and it was so consistent. And they can't fall from a pedestal. I mean, there's falling stars, but that's a little different than
Right.
you know somebody falling from grace. And so it like very quickly shifted into something that I can trust.
And what are your placements? Like what's your sun and moon and rising? The popular, the three big ones.
In tropical Western astrology, I am a Libra double Virgo, but my sun is conjunct Pluto. So no matter how you put it, I'm very scorpionic as well.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
I just was on a call yesterday with a fellow Scorpion. My rising is Scorpio and I have a Venus in Scorpio. So the intensity of going deep and really connecting with the parts that a lot of people feel are scary just comes really naturally to me. I'm like, yep, let's go in. There ain't nothing too deep. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
Yeah, this is me. I have Mercury and Venus and Uranus conjunct in Scorpio in my third house. And I don't even realize when I'm moving into uncomfortable territory, like
Right.
9% of the time, people are like, you're so inappropriate. I'm like, what?
You're
What?
like, was that inappropriate? No.
We can just talk about this, can't we? They're like, you're offensive. You're inappropriate. I'm like, oh, shit. I guess I need
Right.
to figure out that Scorpio. Like, where does the Scorpio start and where does everybody else live?
Yeah, that's so true. And then I've got my sun in Sagittarius and moon in Aquarius. So there's this, I can be really tactless at times,
Aquarius
which has
moon.
also been like a work in progress, but it's coming from this inquisitive place of curiosity and wanting to know more and wanting to know all of these details and all of the philosophy behind everything, so this seeker energy. But yeah, even that, when I found out that there was such a thing as like a rising sign and like all of these other aspects that you speak of, especially with the Scorpio, my life actually just made more sense.
That's
And
right.
it
Yeah.
really helped along my healing journey. I was like, oh, all of these intense things that have happened throughout my life, these deaths and rebirths, and me becoming this chameleon of, yeah, the cycles was all written in the stars. And I find that absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. I think that's the number one goal I have anytime I do a reading is to help people become more okay with who they are through the
Mm,
pure validation of what's written in the stars.
that's right.
Like to most people feel so validated, and in the ways that society misunderstands us, it often creates confusion in our system. It's like,
Hmm.
wait, but I thought, but hold on, what? I'm not allowed. You have to behave how now? And
Yeah.
then you read the chart and you're like, oh, no, no, no. It's my role to be a provocateur, or it's my
Right.
role to ask the tough questions, or it's my role to be seeking truth, or my emotional embodiment is quicker than other people, or I take longer to process emotions, or I need a lot of communication, or I don't need communication. I just need
Mhm.
time by myself, or, it's all there.
It's
It's
all
all
there.
there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what is the role in transcending all
Yeah.
of that? That's been on my mind as of recent because we have in each sign, it's kind of like human design as well. We have these shadow aspects, and then we have the gift, and then we have the city, and like how we're always constantly moving between these different states of like, oh, fuck. I can see where I was like hanging out in the dirt there for a while when really this has been calling me. They're all these seeds,
Yeah.
calling us to higher truths is the way I like to look at it.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Yeah.
Mm. And so I'm wondering, how has astrology played a role in your own kind of healing journey? I know we've kind of touched on that a bit, but just knowing these different aspects of ourselves and being able to point to different areas in our life, like especially when events happen that feel very hard, whether that's individually or collectively. It's like we have this kind of map that can point to different things. So I'm just wondering for you personally, like how that's helped soften some blows or maybe give you a little bit of a landing pad.
Well, there's quite a few ways actually, because, well, first of all, that Scorpio placement, I go inappropriate all the time, and I don't understand why anybody would think it's inappropriate. So it's helped me to understand other people's discomfort with my ability to speak about absolutely everything. And then that helps me to gain more sensitivity before I'm like jumping into these harder conversations. I like check in if people want to go there, maybe, or maybe save
Mhm.
it for, finding appropriateness, but also I have a Virgo stellium. So I have, what that means is I actually have 5 planets and my rising in Virgo. And Virgo as an archetype is highly critical, both internal and external. In, like you said, like in the muck, in the dirt, that's where it goes. In its city form, it's a healer. Virgo is a healing archetype. It's super pure. It's angelic, right? Like the reason why a lot of Virgos get touted as perfectionists is because somewhere in them they actually know the purest expression of life.
That's so
And
beautiful. I'm thinking of a Virgo friend right now, and I just cannot wait for him to listen to this episode. He's like, "That's why. That's why."
yeah. And when we're in a distortion from that purity, it comes off as criticism, like often self-criticism. So Virgo as on the rising, that means I'm also ruled by Mercury. So my mind is incredibly busy. And when I started to understand that first of all, I'm highly critical in nature, where my standard of existence is 10 or 11 rungs up the ladder higher than the average human being. And so, you know, it's a blessing and a curse to have that in your system. And so it really helped me, first of all, to like calm that critic and like bring my expectation to a more realistic place. And then also when I'm viewing other people, to recognize that the critic in me is always seeking for what can be fixed, what can be brought into a higher expression, but most people don't care. Like, so just like zip it and don't say it, you know, like, and at the same time, that becomes an incredibly valuable tool when people are coming to me as a guide or as a teacher or as for advice or for counsel. It actually is one of the most exquisite gifts that I embody, is my ability to see like all of the details and the intricacies of how everything goes together. And then I have this strong Libra, which is very relational. So those parts all separate from each other were kind of running amok for a while. And then as I got each of them in a higher octave of expression and then synthesize them together, my whole relational realm changed, both inner and outer. And then also knowing that I'm Mercury ruled, that mind piece, I put such a huge effort on understanding my own mind and calming my own mind and finding peace in my own mind. And my healing comes through the embodiment of the parasympathetic nervous system, because Virgo lives from the mouth to the exit points, and rest and digest is the parasympathetic nervous system.
Feeling that.
Yeah. And I also have a history where my colon would speak to me in certain environments. And now I have a relationship with my colon where it's a high intuitive communication mechanism, because Virgo lives in the gut, right? So that's a lot of personal information. But then externally, the more charts I read, the more like different combinations of planetary placements and like interacting with human beings and getting to know people through their charts, I actually have diminished the volume of judgment that runs through my system by more than I knew could possibly exist. Because instead, when I look at humans and I look at the way that they're expressing, whether it's through fear or through love or through anxiety or through depression or through connection or however they're expressing, whether I criticize it or not, it actually first now gets filtered through compassion, because I'm like, we're meant to be different. We all have such different roles. And just because you're different than me doesn't make you wrong. And just because we see differently on really highly charged topics doesn't mean that you're also not right. And that is probably the most liberating thing I've ever experienced. Like, I can legit sit in the room with people from across all political spectrums, all religious ideologies, all sides of war, and not be triggered. And I don't think that very many people can say that, but that is a gift that astrology has given me, as well as understanding the nature of the mind and programming, which is a whole other topic. But like, when you understand how a mind, how a perspective, or how a belief is formed through the inputs and the environment that we're immersed in, the perspective is so predictable And then
Mm.
you take somebody and you put that same person in a different environment, and the perspective changes, let's say after 3 months or 6 months or however long it takes in a new environment, and their perspective changes completely. And so, how I got to that point is a multi-layered story, but to both experience that within myself and to witness it in others, I actually can't be mad at people for thinking differently than me anymore. So it like cleaned up the experience of othering.
Uh,
And people will get
wow.
mad at me for even just saying that. Like, that's the funniest part about that piece, is that people will be like, no, your problem if you don't think the way I do. And I'm just like, okay,
Hmm.
it's super peaceful over here. You keep over there and you're fighting. I'm feeling good over here. I feel clear. I feel empowered. I feel love. I feel I have a lot more access to love. I have a lot more access to compassion
Mm.
than I used to. Not you, than I used to. For me, in the
Yeah.
scale of that for me.
I'm hearing and feeling all that right now in this moment because yeah, what a gift to be able to look at the wholeness of the person sitting across from you
Mhm.
within all of their experiences, all of their gifts, all of their shadows, and know that, yeah, we're all here to show each other things, new
Mhm.
things, and to build on our relationships to one another with more capacity to see the potential in one another and also to point out the shit that's not so nice to look at, you
Yeah.
know? And so, even though that side of things isn't always as appreciated, it's so necessary.
Yeah. And to be able to sit with somebody without being triggered
Yeah.
doesn't mean that, let's say somebody has a harmful view or is causing harm, that I condone that. It just means that that's theirs. And I'm not going to let it mess me up, because I'm more useful when I'm centered and grounded.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I definitely do not condone harm.
Of
I
course.
also sit on the side of fighting for human rights. I also, I'm the most anti-war person you could
Oh God.
ever imagine.
Same, same. I just don't,
Like,
I don't get it. I don't get it. I never have, and I never will. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
This part of me, which I also have a lot of Libra placements. I can't remember exactly where, but this want and need for there to be resolution and for there to be people to be able to see each other um, in relationship to one another. I had this conversation a few weeks ago with a beautiful human being about the difference between being witnessed and perceived
Mm, wow. Yeah.
and the nuance of that. I mean, even just hearing those words, like, what does it feel like to be witnessed without judgment in all you are, and then to be perceived? Like, I can feel that, oof, those words and how they can either point to separation or more connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That is powerful.
Yeah.
That's a good contemplation for all of
I
us
know.
to sit with for a little while.
Let's think about
I'm
this
going
for
to
a
take
little
that.
while.
I'm going to take that to my meditation student school.
Right. So, like, speaking of the intensity of the times, is there something that you've been contemplating or witnessing that you really feel in the stars that you wish more people knew about right now? Because I know there's some pretty big things happening, but it seems like there's always big things happening on this earth. So it's kind of hard to like pick and choose, but obviously things are quite heated right now and there's a lot of separation and but there's also a lot of really beautiful connections being made and people coming together. We just don't hear about it as often, is the way I feel about it, but it's
Yeah,
charged, real
it's
charged.
it's supercharged. It's supercharged. I would say that if I, I've really shifted the way that I want to share about astrology, because I feel like I want to be participating in the astrology conversation in a way that people have something to work with, instead of
Yes.
just like, it's crazy, because it is.
Yeah. It's
Like,
crazy.
just buckle up, because
Yeah.
it's a
Buckle
rough
up.
year. Yeah, it's a rough year. We're on a ride all the way through 2025. Like, we've got a lot going on. But having said that, to validate what you just said, one of the most important things that we come to understand over the next 2 years is that we live in a dualistic reality. There's night and dark, there's pleasure, there's pain. That this polarity is our greatest teacher. We wouldn't know pain if we didn't, or we wouldn't know pleasure if we didn't know pain. We wouldn't know joy if we didn't know suffering. We wouldn't understand the day if we didn't know the night. And so polarity is such a huge teacher. And in tropical Western this May, we have Jupiter helps us to understand the biggest lessons that are going on right now. And Jupiter spends a year in a sign. It takes 12 years for Jupiter to move around the sun. And some years it's broken up a bit because of retrogrades, but this time it's not. It's in Gemini for a full year starting in May.
Saucy.
And so the highest teaching for us to understand is how to live in that polarity, because there's no greater teacher of polarity than Gemini. It's the twins. It's the twins. It's the higher and the lower mind. It's the angel and the devil. It is the polarity. But like you said about the city, like the highest expression of the sign, the highest expression of Gemini is to be okay in the polarity and see what's beyond that. And what's beyond that is that oneness, that it is all one. Like even the polarity is born out of one. And it's like that Rumi poem, beyond the field, beyond the rights and wrongs, there's a field, I'll meet you there.
Yeah.
And that's Jupiter in that's the potential of Jupiter in Gemini. And so there's this really beautiful opportunity for healing. And it's part of why I've been doing that homework that I spoke of earlier. That's been so liberating for me, because I see what's coming. But with that, understanding that we have a choice of what side of that polarity we want to feed. And what's really interesting, as another layer of this, is that we have Pluto went from Capricorn into Aquarius, and it's going to stay in Aquarius till 2044. But we do have a little bit of retrograde where Pluto is going to come back into Capricorn and move into Aquarius. And so and this is all tropical Western. I know that there's lots of conversations about different styles, but we're just going to stick with this because tropical Western helps us to understand the current system that we live in, which this is what I'm talking about. So Pluto in Capricorn moved there in 2008, and that's where we saw some economic downturn. You're in Alberta,
Yep.
Right. So we saw economic, quite significant shifts then, and then it stayed there till now. So you can do the math on how many years that is.
Yeah.
It's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. And when it's in Pluto, it gave a lot of power, because Pluto is power. It's also shamanistic. So it's power that changes. And Pluto is more powerful than the ego. So even when the ego gets involved, the power of change, the power of transformation, it's a death and a rebirth, like that dramatic. We often call this energy more like alchemical or shamanic energy. It's going to take you into the underworld and it's going to bring you back reborn. And so what we are just coming out of, and actually still in for this whole year, is this Pluto in Capricorn top-down structures that actually turn abusive when power is imbalanced. I don't think I need to see much more. No matter where you sit on all the different topics going on in the world, we can all see where this is playing out through the lens that we live our life. When Pluto moved into Aquarius this last time in January of this year, it went hand in hand with the sun. And I haven't really heard many astrologers speak of it this way, but this is how I'm understanding it, is that the sun kind of passed a baton between Pluto and Capricorn and Pluto in Aquarius and was like, here, take what we've created and run with it.
Wow.
And so it gave Pluto in Aquarius a lot of strength with the system of power and control from top down. And what we're seeing now is we're living in this world of like high surveillance world. Yeah. Everything is tracked, big data. We're all online. Like even this call, it's being recorded, and on top of it, it's AI. And it's no mistake that AI is just like busting through the scenes like never before as we have Pluto and Aquarius, because Aquarius is Uranus, it's internet, it's information, it's data, it's science, it's humanity, it's the everybody of it. And so what I believe what we're going to see is this period of time where still the systems of Capricorn are going to gain strength through surveillance and what they can do with that control. But then what's going to happen is Pluto is going to move back into Capricorn this fall, and we're going to see it go through another metamorphosis of change, those systems and structures. And then Pluto is going to come back into Aquarius, but this time without the sun. So it's going to have a different re-entry energy. And then also the different aspects that are happening in the sky, then it's going to have a different re-entry energy as well. What's fascinating to me is that this is going to happen during the US election.
Oh, shit.
And I'm just going to like let that be for a second.
Yeah.
And then Pluto goes back into Aquarius. So what I find to be so fascinating and is that right now, oh, and pardon me, Mars has us in a 2-year cycle of war.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
And so what to me is really fascinating is that during this time of war, every action we take online is being recorded and programmed into the learning system of AI, and it's creating what will be spit out in the future.
Whoa.
And so part of my personal mission and hoping to spread this with lots of people is to become increasingly aware of how you are programming the AI through what you're sharing on social media, what your phone is hearing you say, what, you know, like all of the ways that your words, your actions, your behaviors, and even the way you're prompting AI with questions, what you're doing with that. And does it align with the world that you want to be creating? Or does that align with the world that we want to die? And there's a big contrast in this because there's power in social media to have a resistance movement and to be exposing stuff. Yet at the same time, we're programming the future of the AI mechanism, which we don't really even fully understand how it's going to play out in the world. And so we need to somehow program it with more peace and more love and more unity and more togetherness.
Okay. So can we just have a like a pause for a full body tingling sensation? That I love that you just brought all of that into the fold, because what a thing to move forward with. Anybody that's listening out there today, and however many people tune into this episode, what a beautiful thing to put out into the world. You know, we already know that our words and our thoughts, they create things, but then to take this to another level of now this like other being is listening.
Yeah, that's right.
And how powerful is that to know that we can be a guiding force in whichever direction that this goes. I know that this is going to be something that I'm going to be highly sensitive to over the coming months and years, because we need to start creating something a little bit different than what we've been experiencing. That's for sure.
Well, and you know, you want to go a layer deeper.
I do. Let's go. Let's go. I'm ready.
Let's dive in. Okay, so let's go. So a lot of people are becoming more familiar with frequency as a modality.
That's right. Yes.
Healy.
With
devices that are able to read and interface with your subconscious mind.
That's right.
We have quantum computing and quantum internet being born. And quantum internet isn't fully here yet, but quantum computing is. And we have devices like, I know you and I both are super fans of the Healy.
Yeah. Healy. Yay for the win. And all the other things. Right now I'm wearing my Apollo because I love that one too. But the Healy, I could just go on and on. But go ahead. We'll get into that more, I'm sure.
So what the Healy is able to do is you can put in prompts. So think of it, it's not AI, but it's organic intelligence. It has the ability to interface with your subconscious mind. So I can put in a prompt and it can go find information from my subconscious mind and show me what I'm not seeing within myself. And this technology with Healy specifically, it's very well secured. They have a high reverence for privacy and security of information. And this technology lives beyond Healy and in many other places. And with technology, technology itself is neutral. Now, imagine when that technology of the quantum internet is you're looking at your phone and your phone is interfacing with your subconscious mind. Right now, I have a choice. I'm like, I want to use my device. I'm giving consent for my device to read my subconscious mind right now for the purpose that I choose.
Right.
But what happens when that gets into the hand of like government or that gets into the hand of like authority?
Right.
Right. And we no longer now have a choice. Like I found it to be amazing quite a few years ago where like if you got pulled over at a stop check, they would have to ask you to get out of the vehicle and then you'd have to consent to a breathalyzer unless they had a reason to do it.
Right.
When I was in New Zealand, they would just be like, name and registration, please, and shove a device in my mouth, like in my face, and it would read me right away. Well, imagine being pulled over and you have a major issue with authority and it's got a device that it can read your subconscious mind and it's getting a printout of where you're at.
Oh my God.
So for somebody who's innocent, this is a great thing. Right? This is great because it can show innocence. It might show fear, it might show whatever, but it would also show innocence. So in some ways, this is great. In other ways, this isn't so great. Like for the multitude of people that don't subscribe to pharmaceutical health versus naturopathic health, and if it gets in those hands and how that can be played out. And so I think one of the things that I've really been contemplating is how do we have our own defense mechanism for these things? And ultimately what it is the purification of our own mind. Like for me, it's pushing me into a greater expression of the yogic philosophy of Saucha. So I have the ability in the moment to find peace within myself. I have the ability within the moment to regulate my nervous system and come into a centered place instead of being a victim to all of my triggers of the history of my life. Right.
Yeah.
And so like, that's the potential. And a lot of people people will hear me say this and they'll just be like, you're nutsoid. Like that is the greatest conspiracy. But actually, the technology exists. I'm interfacing with it all the time. And the reason I can see this as a future potential, first of all, is how clearly I can see the surveillance land in the astrology, and also how clear I can see the acceleration of technology as this quantum computing turns into quantum internet, turns into, is the computer more powerful than the person? And if you listen to some of the boys down at Davos in Switzerland, this is what they're moving towards, is that the computer or the technology is primary over everything.
Yeah.
So I think we're moving into a really interesting place. So this is my thing. This year, you want to focus on astrologically, your mental health.
Yes.
Your mental health. There's never been a greater motivation to work on your mental health ever.
Yeah. What I think of when you say, well, all of that, because there's so much there, is, the mind, our minds, collective minds created all of this. So therefore we have the power within us. The power is still there. We are powerful beyond all measure, beyond all means. That power requires us to harness things. That's right. Internally. Love, empowerment, embodiment, our nervous systems. Like there's no mistake that we're hearing so much about nervous system regulation, vagus nerve, all of these things, frequency medicine. It's like the gift and the poison are coexisting,
That's right.
these polarities that you're speaking to. And so, do we have the power to create something different? Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, we do. For those of you wishing to dive into the world of somatic healing and get a taste of what it's like to discover the wisdom of your body, I'm offering $100 off my signature course, Reclaiming Resilience, to the listeners of this episode. It is a self-paced 5-week course that teaches you how to be with big emotions and sensations. It expands your capacity for more joy, more love, and more pleasure, while you also learn how to access your boundaries, intuition, and build safety within your body. Essentially, you'll be learning how to harness the power of your nervous system and welcome in more clarity, authentic communication, and fulfilling relationships. In the program, we are changing the way that we perceive ourselves, our patterns, and our limiting beliefs, as well as finding our unique voice. Use the code, all caps, feel good at checkout. And for those of you who are seeking one-on-one support, I also offer coaching and therapy packages and one-on-one sessions. I'll pop all of that information in the show notes. And now let's get back to the show.
Well, and then that means that the war is, although it is definitely happening on the ground, the real war is in our mind.
That's right.
Because the computer is being programmed by us right now.
Exactly.
And as we are programming that computer, we choose what we're up against.
Yep.
Right. And so the more people that are programming the computer for unity, for compassion, for connection, the more people we have doing that, the less the war erupts in the long run.
Yep.
And this contemplation has also shifted me into more of like a simulation theory. Have you gone down that rabbit hole yet?
I mean, a little bit, yes, but go ahead. Let's hear it.
So there's this really incredible quantum physicist named Nassim Haramein, who I'm actually pronouncing his name wrong, but you can find him. I actually was so blessed. I got to sit with him on a bus ride from like a drop point to a private Dalai Lama event. Like
Amazing.
7 or 8 years ago. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, stuck
no big deal.
This genius. I'm stuck beside this genius for an hour. He's like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I guide yoga nidra. And I'm like, what do you do? Well, he's like, well, I'm really hoping that I can talk to the Dalai Lama about changing the way that we're teaching kids about physics in schools, so that, because right now we're teaching kids on a false premise, which is keeping us disconnected from reality. And I was like, tell me more.
Yeah.
And of course, me as a questioner, I'm just like, tell me everything. But so I've been following his work for quite some time. And he's gotten to the point where the mathematical calculations, the quantum calculations of this current reality that is playing out is more aligned with a simulation theory than it is with like anything else. Like it's so close to being like proven as truth. Whether that current iteration of truth moves again, I mean, I can only assume that it will. But the most accurate explanation of reality. And I like to simplify complex things. So this is how I see it. Like Vedic texts, there's ancient texts that are like, this is how the mind works. This is this, like, here's how you free yourself. These are the pathways to liberation, like all of that. This is like the program guidebook for the game of life that we're in. If we metaphorically called Earth a game of life, the ancient text is the guidebook. It's like the game notes, like this is how you play the game. And incarnation, we come in and we understand that there are certain parameters of the game. And so if we understand those guidebooks, we understand the parameters of the game. But then it also says the further you get away from these guides, the less you realize that you're in a game. It says that right in the notes, in the game notes. It says that.
Yeah.
Right. And it says that in many different iterations of the game notes. Like the greater the separation, the less you realize you're part of this source experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have things in reality that is helping us to understand what it is. Like Greg Braden, one of my favorite teachers, talks about the holographic universe, but he also shares a really beautiful story about an indigenous elder from the Santa Fe, New Mexico area. I apologize, I don't know the indigenous name of the land, but the elder there taught him that when we had this separation event, consciousness desired to be known. And so consciousness keeps creating experiences to know itself in the world. And so we have all these reflections in the world helping us to remember who we are. And this can start from anything from, film. I mean, even precedes film in their storytelling, but in a modern day, like film, or I'm going to say the algorithm, right? Like the algorithms that we see on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And this algorithm helps us to understand how the mind creates beliefs.
Mm.
And because it's this external experience that's helping us to see how the mind is creating beliefs, it's also accelerating the rate that the beliefs are being created, because now you're in it both internally and externally. Yet at the same time, part of the simulation theory, what it's saying is you are the creator. And so source isn't outside of you, it's inside of you. Mm-hmm. You are source. You are a piece of source co-creating in this field of this earthly experience. Yeah. And if that is also then true, it kind of blows up a little bit of the manifestation stuff in the ways that I feel like the manifestation teachings are toxic, because I'm not totally in control of my reality.
That's right.
There's 8-ish billion other people co-creating with me. And so sometimes my reality, I actually am a victim to somebody else's reality. Mm-hmm. But do I then play a victim, or do I move out of that? Right? Like if I'm in an earthquake, I didn't necessarily manifest the earthquake.
Right.
I'm part of the simulation where I'm located in the simulation where the earthquake is happening, right? But I didn't create the earthquake. Same within relationships sometimes, or the families that we're born into. I didn't create that, but I came through that, and I'm co-playing with these other people, and I get to decide how I interface with that. So that means then that each of us are programmers of the simulation. Yeah. Through our thoughts, through our words, through our actions, through our beliefs, which means that I do have an active role in co-creating where we're heading in this world. And so there's like so many different layers. I mean, I could go on about the simulation theory for a long time. For me, it feels really liberating. It feels really expansive, because maybe this world wasn't created for me. Maybe it wasn't totally created by me, but I get to be a reality crafter in my corner of this world. And through connection and connectivity, whether it's through voice or just through nervous system, like the social nervous system, being in proximity with people, or through the quantum and the way that I'm connecting that way, my words and my actions make a difference.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, all of these teachings, oh my God, so many things. I'm having mini mind explosions right now. So thanks for bringing in all of that, because it reminds me of so many things. It reminds me of, The Journey of Souls. I don't know if you've ever read that book. I think that's the name of it, where we have these in between, like not even in Bardo, but before we come into our physical bodies, we like sit on this panel of other creators, and we're like, so what would be fun to experience this time around? And we plot out when different characters or different experiences are going to come into play in our lives. And we're just having a hoot up there. It's like, what else can we experience? And in those spaces, nothing is good or bad. It's all just neutral. It's like, what do we want to be known for this lifetime? What do we want to co-create with others? And it also reminds me of some of that yogic philosophy that you speak to, where all of these teachings, I think that now that we're moving into, for so many people anyway, more of an embodied practice of being human, more like knowing how to regulate our nervous systems, how to be in connection with other people, and all of these things. It's like everything that I do internally affects my reality. There's no separation in that way. So we can go to a workshop and do some intense meditation or Vipassana or whatever it is. And then suddenly we come home and shit's different. Our relationships are different. People start like reaching back out. You're like, oh, dude, like connections that need to be mended are there right in front of your face, all of these things. So the one is in the many. And that also brings up like a Course in Miracles, how you know, we experience the original separation and it's like, okay, well, I want to feel what it feels like to be like separated from God, source, whatever, and choosing to be further away from those truths. Yeah. And kind of going back and forth in connection and then also not in connection with those things. So to me, it's all kind of just pointing to the same thing.
Yes.
It's like, how can we know ourselves deeper? Yeah. How can we see the nuance of through the lens of discretion, through the lens of love, through the lens of self-compassion, through the lens of the stars, which also are residing internally within us, through devices like Healy, Apollo, like all of these things, whatever they are, you know, because they're all helpful. They all came into existence to show us the opposite of the other shit that's going on.
Well, and the very understanding of frequency itself is so powerful because the moment the frequency changes, the expression changes. Like frequency actually can't lie. It can be the frequency of a lie, right? But the frequency itself can't lie. So because when it changes, right? And so that's another thing that's showing in the astrology is that more people are going to understand themselves as energetics and as frequency, and a greater global understanding of frequency and the power of frequency. And that is going to be coming online. And think about like when people start to understand these bigger concepts of existence, they change always. Yeah. You can't not change as you come to realize things, right? Like forget about all these big topics. Let's go to grief. Let's move into grief, you know? And grief is like one of those things that you don't understand it until you've gone through it. And it's so invisible. And I'm also contemplating, is there, right now I'm contemplating this, is there a mechanism in the human matrix, right? The human body, the human chemical memory, nervous system matrix, where similar to when you give birth, any woman that's given birth and like felt that pain, that raw primal pain of birth. And I'm not even going to qualify that as medicated or unmedicated. I'm just going to say birth, like all the ways are powerful, all of it. That raw primal power, what we're given afterwards as a chemical in our hormonal system is the chemical to forget the pain.
That's right.
Right. And then we do it again. Right. Like I remember after I birthed my first son, it was 25 and a half hours, like a week later being like,
what was that?
I'm so competitive. So this is so funny. A week later being like, I think I could do better than that. I think I could do better than that. Talking about like a week ago, I was just in the most suffering pain I've ever experienced in my entire life. And a week later, I'm like, I think I could do better. But I'm debating right now if I'm experiencing a bit of a similar amnesia with grief. That is a necessary part for me to be able to actually connect with my mom on the other side. And to allow my love to flow that freely ever again. Because for me, and this isn't true for everybody, but for me, my mom was the greatest love experience I've ever had. Like, yes, I've been in love with my husband and with my children, but my mom was like the longest, very first experience with love that lasted consistently for me over 44 years. Yeah. And And there was a part of me that like contracted into not wanting to love that much because the pain of loss was so much. And also my pain making it me unavailable to connect with her.
Mm.
And, you know, I'm about 7 months out now from when she passed. And the first 3 months, I was free falling into grief. I didn't put any blocks or barriers. Fortunately, I was, you know, working in a way that I didn't need to show up.
Yeah.
I knew that it was coming. So I set myself up that I could have time.
What a
No,
gift that
yeah,
was. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so I free falled into it. And I napped in the afternoon if I needed to. And I had a tearful bath first thing in the morning after the kids were out the door. You know, like I free fell into my grief experience to the point where I feel like I'm unrecognizable even to myself in some ways. Like I changed so much. But now there's almost like a forgetting. I sat across the table from a girlfriend who's 2 months out from like her greatest love, passing her father.
Mm.
And she was sharing with me some of her experience. And I was like, yes, yes. And I could like cry with her. I could like feel like have tears coming with her. But my own experience had alchemized so much. It had changed so much that I'm wondering, is there this like forgetting that's happening
Yeah.
that is
Yeah.
opening up new doors, you know?
Totally. I mean, God, grief is such a personal experience for every person. And from what you're describing, it sounds like certain aspects have been alchemized. We've been using that word a lot in this conversation. And what a gift it has been to even have those months where, as you said, you could free fall into the grief and be held and make space for that. Because I think so many people don't have the
Mhm.
space for that or don't create the space for that. And so it blows up or it simmers under the surface and it doesn't have any room or any space to do anything other than just ruminate inside. And like I've definitely had intense grieving experiences, and there is a big difference between the times that I was able to be in my grief and the times where I just could not.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like that's another place where I think we're going to be changing a lot. Because
Mm.
I think collectively, the amount of grief that everybody is experiencing, whether they realize it or not, there's so much to grieve. Like the world just changed astronomically. Inflation is at like ridiculous highs. Things that we could trust are no longer trustworthy. Like there's just so much. So whether you're actually experiencing like the death of a loved one or not, there's just like there's war happening. It's like mind blowing how much grief.
Yeah.
And I think and unfelt grief creates dis-ease in the
Mm.
body,
Hmm.
right? It will eventually get you,
Yeah.
you know, like, so I think there's going to be shifts in that, just that knowing, but
Hmm.
also we can't get there till we know.
Yeah.
We can't get there till we know. Before this, and my dad died 10 years ago. I didn't have the same grieving experience with my dad at all.
Right.
And it's not because I
Exactly.
didn't have a relationship with him, but it wasn't the same relationship,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I just, yeah, I think that, Saturn, Saturn is in Pisces. And, a lot of grief lives in Pisces because it's the ending of things. It's the elder, it's the death,
Mhm.
it's the ending. And Saturn is in there rearranging a lot of things, like to have a compassion practice, and especially looking at all the travesty in the world. I think a lot of people are experiencing a lot of compassion and it's being expressed out as anger
Yeah.
because they don't know how to deal with this much compassion, that volume of compassion
Yeah.
in a way, because they just like, oh, it just needs to stop. Like,
Right.
what?
It's
And
unrelenting. Yeah. Yeah.
And we're not trained on how to have that much compassion move through our system. And that's also mixed with grief. And like,
Mm.
it's a lot of love. What we're actually seeing, what looks like fighting, what looks like war, is actually a lot of love that doesn't know how to express itself in the most loving way possible.
Mm.
And so if I look at it like that, I'm like, this is an expression of grief. This is an expression of compassion. This is an expression of love. I can't be mad if it's directed in ways that feels uncomfortable.
That's
Do you
right.
get what I mean? Like,
Oh,
anyways.
absolutely. It feels like this idea of what you're speaking to is compassion and love and grief turned into fight, because some things have been so loved and so cherished and so ruthlessly taken away
Well, and
on
hasn't,
so many different levels.
and if we just look at how, I'm not just going to say a gender, I mean the masculine
Mm-hmm.
has been bred or trained or conditioned to deal with sadness, it's
Right.
anger.
Yeah,
And so a lot of this sadness, compassion, love, grief, anger that's being expressed is like the patriarchy living in us,
that's right.
because that's how we know to deal with it. We're just like fighting machines. We just like express it out as anger.
Yeah.
But what's under that anger, and how can we use that in other ways, in a creative way, in a like in a connected way?
Yeah, it requires actually touching in to those things, experiencing ourselves in the grief, in the joy, in all of it, and potentially this ability that we have to build over time to be with difficult things, because I
Yeah.
think that's one of the missing pieces, the distractions, the endless distractions, right? It's like a fight for our attention. And
Mm-hmm.
so again, we get to choose. Ultimately, I think choice gets taken, or we feel like we don't have choice, but there is always choice to choose, especially on social media, especially in interactions, being able to step away. So many people are like, no, you got to be in it like 24/7. And from a nervous system perspective, ain't nobody meant to be in it 24/7. That's the shit that got us into this mess. Like taking self-compassion breaks and being able to tune in and being able to look at your loved ones, or like your dogs, or the things that bring us
Good plan.
joy, or laying on the ground and looking up at the stars in fascination. All of those elements, although they seem maybe unimportant when there's a war happening, they are the things that like
Need
connect
them
us
more than
back
ever.
to our humanity.
Yeah, we need them more than ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So holy
Yeah.
shit. We just went some places that
Covered a lot of ground today. That's my Scorpio. That's my Scorpio speaking.
and I'm not gonna rein you in either because I love it. So thank you for sharing. I mean, everything that you brought to the table today. I mean, God, we should probably just schedule another conversation to go into like Healy and frequency hacks, just like that stuff in and of itself, because I know you've got a lot to say on that. And I've also got a lot to say on that, because Healy has really been integral in
Yeah.
my life and in really changing some things. And I haven't shared on it publicly for a really long time, just because there's been other things going on, other things that have been drawing my attention and have needed attending to. But the Healy, I mean, it's just this incredible piece of technology that has a bazillion different uses for tuning into these areas that are so subconsciously wired within us that we just, there's not even awareness of it until there is. And you're like, oh, okay, I could see
Yeah.
how this could be playing out.
Well, I was just with Joe Dispenza in December, and his
Love
research
me
team.
some Joe. Love
Ah,
me some Joe.
love that man. So he's got a massive research team, and his research team is coming through with some pretty substantial information right now. And one of the
Oh,
things that he shared, and I mean, like, he's not selling Healy. He's not like a Healy. I
right,
mean, this is just research on like how human bodies work.
right.
He shared that our cells are 100 times more receptive to electromagnetics than they are to chemistry.
Mm,
And like just that statement alone, if we just back that up a little bit, how the body works, it's so logical. The nervous system is signaling the endocrine system. So the
mm,
sequence of events is the nervous system is signaling the endocrine system.
mm.
But we have a medical system that's based off of chemistry. So the endocrine system, but then the nervous system is still signaling a different way, because until the nervous system shifts, it's going to continue to signal the endocrine system to behave in a certain way. So we're not addressing the right layer. When we address the electromagnetic layer come through the nervous system, that's why it's 100 times more receptive, because it's coming in a step earlier in the process, and then it's changing how the endocrine system is being signaled, which changes everything from emotions to beliefs to health. And
Mm.
like the Healy, what I really noticed is, for me with my grieving process,
Oh,
I
yeah.
actually did a whole bunch of work with my Healy during that time. I was on a 28
Tell
day
us.
I
Yeah.
was on a
Tell us.
28-day protocol 2 months after my mother passed. And the protocol was meant to go to the roots. It's like the main program is called To the Roots. And the guy who created it, he said from compliance, he had to change the name, but it used to be To the Roots used to be called the cause of all things, or the cause. So it's like the cause behind all of the issues, or the cause
Mm,
behind the issue is basically what it's looking at. So it's looking at the energetics behind the expression.
right.
And the timing of doing this is so interesting, because the way that he works is, first of all, you work on the kidneys and then you work on the lungs. And if you get the terrain sorted out so that there's pathways of detoxification and the
Mm,
lungs are working really well, so you can circulate prana through the body, and the lungs, we know in Chinese medicine, is grief,
yeah.
then you can go a lot deeper in the process. And so what the protocol is designed to do is it's designed to like increase your bandwidth to hold, feel, metabolize, and release emotion.
Mm,
And when we can feel, metabolize, and release emotion, we can get to the root of the thing that's causing the commotion inside of us.
yeah.
And so I was doing this 28-day protocol like 2 months after my mom had passed. And while I was doing this protocol, I was literally in like journaling conversations with the many different versions of myself, like my little girl. I journal things, and I was like, wait a minute. This is the energy of my little girl on the playground being like, my mom's better than your mom, when people would come to me with their grief stories. And I'd be like, how can you ever? You can't compare your sadness to my sadness. I'm the saddest person in the whole wide world.
Mm,
And I watched that and I was like, oh God, I'm doing Go to the Roots right now. Like, I'm actually in this,
mm,
the embodiment of this little girl inside of me. And it was so supportive for me to actually open up and feel these things, which allowed my grief process to be in that free fall that I spoke of.
mm.
But like, yeah, I mean, we could reschedule. And I think like
Oh
yoga
my God,
nidra
Yoga Nidra.
is a whole other layer, because that for me, that preceded everything with Healy. Like, I had nothing to do with Healy, where I'm already tapping into all of this stuff
Right.
through Yoga Nidra, through Joe Dispenza, through Bruce Lipton, through the power of the mind and the nervous system and the Taurus field and all of that stuff. So
Mhm.
when Healy came in, it was just like, oh, I already understand all the mechanisms behind what we're doing. And now this is enhancing it.
Yeah,
It's accelerating the process and
that's right.
allowing me to feel.
Mm.
Oh my gosh.
Healy, y'all, deep cycle, I think is what Jen's referring to,
Yes.
that whole program. Because I,
Yeah.
I know that one well too. And it was a trip
Yeah.
doing all of that. And so, yeah, I feel like that would be amazing just to get on here and geek out about the different programs and what we've used them for. Because I've had mine for, I think, 2.5
Oh,
years
nice.
now. And so, and I haven't even gotten to the fitness programs really. I used them a few times and they were awesome with recovery. There's so many that I actually haven't even gotten to, because there are hundreds of programs for a multitude of things. So it's just kind of endless. And I'm sure that's going to keep on getting upgrades.
Yeah, I'm the same as you. I've only just got started. and I've had it for over a year. But my son had head to toe eczema, like all
Mm,
over his whole body. And
yeah,
we literally tried everything and we couldn't touch it. It was just getting worse and worse and worse.
yeah.
And after 2 weeks, or after the first week, the flare up stopped. After the second week, it started to regress. And after 2 months, his skin is totally clear. And like, I didn't know what foods trigger it. So we still have to stay out of those foods. But
Of
even some
course.
of the foods that he's been allergic to, he can now eat. And he just
Incredible.
asked for it. He's like, Mama, can I have the Healy, please? I'm like,
Yeah.
yep, absolutely. And sometimes he doesn't want it. And I'm like, okay, fine. Like I'm not going to force it on him, but he recognizes how much it helps. Yeah. And that's
Totally.
like my surface scratching was like, how many people are working with skin stuff that there isn't an ointment or a medication
Yeah.
that is touching it. It's just chronic.
That's right. Do you remember what programs you're using for that?
For him, we were using, well, I started with Pure, of course, which
Yeah,
works with the
pure.
terrain, and then liver and gut health. And then we used a lot of skin stuff. And now what comes up for him in the scans is all the scar harmony
Ah,
stuff. So
yeah.
we're just like cleaning up remnants of what was there. And then if he like slips and eats foods that he's allergic to, there's an allergy program.
Right. I
And
love the
I've
allergy program.
It's the best.
It's so
You know,
good.
like French fries are often covered in stuff now. So
Yeah.
French fries aren't gluten free, which
Right.
is fine if you don't have a real gluten allergy.
But
But
if you
like
do,
if gluten really messes you up, like that's kind of crappy. Like people need to know well, maybe French fries are just crappy in the first place, but my kids love French fries. I'm gonna feed them French fries.
that's right.
So do I. I like them. I mean, we're not eating them every day, but it's a nice treat. But yeah, he ate French fries and found out afterwards that they were coated in gluten. And I just immediately popped it on him and he didn't have a response. And I was like, whoa, is that real? Did that just happen?
Yep.
You know?
I've definitely found that with allergy, especially because I'm someone that's prone to skin stuff, and I've used my Healy for that. And it was absolutely incredible things that it just cleared up within a really short amount of time. That I had changed my diet, I had done all of these things, and yet it was still happening. And so Healy was one of those things where, and even if I know if I've eaten something that I didn't agree with, like I can run the gastro program or the
Yeah.
allergy program and I will get relief. It may not take it away like immediately, but it will make it manageable so that, I'm not feeling like shit for days and days and days. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But we change the information behind the biology and the biology changes.
Yeah.
And we're doing with Healy. We're changing the information behind it. It's Bruce Lipton. It's the biology of belief. It's stem cells. It's environment. It's all of it. And it's just a tool that helps us. It's amazing.
So I'm wanting to know, can you tell people where they can find you and hang out in your very expansive world?
The easiest place is just my website, which is my name, janaroemer.com.
Okay.
And it kind of points you everywhere except for to Healy because I haven't updated my website with Healy. But then I have another place called attunetothemoon.com. And Attune to the Moon, you can find all kinds of things about astrology and yoga nidra, and I've brought them together for Astro Nidra. So the website itself, soon to be app, when I custom,
Amazing.
I
Yeah.
know, I'm so stoked. That's my homework after our call is to get the revisions over. Is that I built it off of a custom build. So instead of being built on the Gregorian calendar and the clock, it's actually built off the planetary positions. So when you log in, although there are over 250 practices and growing in there, you'll only see less than a dozen that are relevant for today's astrology. So decision fatigue, bye-bye. I mean, with the app, you're going to be able to search for the practices that you love, no matter what the timing is. But right now, that's what it is. And then Instagram, Jana_Roemer or Attune to the Moon. And,
Well,
another place.
congratulations on that app launch. I was just about to ask you if you had any exciting stuff that you wanted to share. And so that's huge.
Doing
That's
that.
big. Yeah.
Yeah. And then another great place, which is a company that I fully love and believe in and just absolutely admire, is Insight Timer. I'm
I
on
love
their
that
app.
app too. Oh,
Yep. It's a
so
free
good.
app. And I just want to say right now, Christopher, the guy who created Insight Timer, is going up against Apple in a
What?
really huge way because He right now the app, so all the membership and all that. When you have an app in the App Store, did everybody know that Apple takes 30% right off the top?
Did not know
They take
that.
30%.
Apple.
So,
Come on
uh-huh,
now.
Apple, yep. And they worked with Apple for a while to be able to create donations so the teachers would get 100% of the donations. Insight Timer didn't take any, and Apple didn't take any. And just last month, Apple changed their terms and conditions, and they're taking 30% of our donations now. So when the people that are doing the meditations or doing the lives are donating to the publishers or to the teachers, they're thinking that they're getting all of it, but now Apple's taking 30% and Insight Timer isn't. And so Christopher is going up against Apple being like, that's not your money. You're getting enough money. You're a monopoly. There's nowhere else for us to go.
That's
When
right.
we created this, it was the terms and conditions, and now you're changing the rules. And that's just showing an unbridled power that's not fair. So I'm really proud of him. And I love that app because it's free for the most part. You can access premium products, but there's so many meditations for free on there for so many people. So
Well, thank you for telling us about Apple. Shame on you, Apple. Fuck. It's like, why? Couldn't it just be a reasonable like 5%,
30.
3 to 5% on like this, like you said, monopoly? Like, Jesus.
Yeah.
Anyways. Okay.
Well,
Well,
and
I
he's okay
digress.
with he's okay with the 30% for the
Yeah,
membership because that's the cost of
totally.
doing business,
Yeah.
whatever. But the
Still,
donations, I mean, I think it's a good principle. It's a good principle war.
absolutely. I'm here for it too.
Yeah.
Well, oh my God, this has been just an enlightening, incredible, galactic, big conversation. So I just want to thank you for being on. What an honor it was to be here witnessing you in this and just celebrating, yeah, all of these things that are just expanding in your life. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. What a treat.
You're so welcome. And stay tuned for another episode with Jana at some point because there will be one coming, sounds like.
Fun.
Have an incredible day in Nelson and take care of yourself. And we'll talk again sometime soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye for now. As always, thank you so much for listening. Life is busy, so it means even more to me that you are here. Listen, we've got so many great episodes coming up, so please make sure that you follow along on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you are listening. And if you appreciate these episodes, please do us a favor and leave a review and share the show with anyone you think this episode would benefit. See you again next week. Bye for now.